right, welcome. Life Extension Live. I'm Dr. Mike, and that is.
Dr. Crystal.
I decided not to point anymore because, I did it right that time. See, I don't know, I can't do it. Anyways, great to have you all watching today. Dr. Crystal and I are going to be talking about a couple of diet trends that are out there. One is called carb cycling, and the other one is called protein pacing. Maybe you've heard of these, maybe you haven't. We just thought since they're trending, we would like to take a look at them and give you guys our honest professional opinion about them. We're not promoting any of this. We're not saying do it, don't do it. It's just trending. Dr. Crystal, we just thought we would review them, right?
Yeah, I think it's always a good idea to when there's a buzz about something on YouTube or TikTok or Instagram.
Right.
People like to. It's very difficult to find trusted sources of information,
Right.
and so we're just providing our objective opinion on these two trends.
So let's get into it. On today's show, we're going to talk about carb cycling. There you go. Protein pacing. And ultimately, what we want to answer for all of us, Dr. Crystal and I included, is are they worth it? Is it really worth going into these types of trends? So we're going to start, I think, with the first one, Dr. Crystal, is the carb cycling. So give, as the doctor of clinical nutrition, can you just give us your definition or your understanding of carb cycling just at a real high level?
Yes, well, it's just varying your intake or the amount of carbohydrates that you take uh, based on your activity level, and you are varying the days where some days you have lower carbs than usual, some days you have higher carbs than usual. It seems what we're identifying, generally speaking, we are talking about individuals who are already consuming lower carbohydrates as it
Right.
compares to your typical recommendations, USDA, RDA recommendations based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So these individuals are already on the lower carb side, not ketogenic, not that
Right, right,
low, but
right,
these
right.
are people, or this idea revolves around someone who is already kind of cutting back on carbs, and then allowing them certain days where they can maybe have a few more carbs. And people kind of incorporate this in different ways.
Mhm.
5 days a week and lower carb, and then 2 days a week high carbs, or maybe an individual maybe matching their low high carb days based on their physical activity level.
Right. So let's talk about what the range is then. And let's be clear. So low versus high. Again, these are people already on kind of a low carb diet. So this is not necessarily RDA stuff, right? So you have on the low carb days, and you mentioned it could be 5 days for whatever you, however you decide to do that. You're going to be, oh, there it is on the super, 100 to 125 grams of carbs a day. But then on that higher carb day, you're going to be 175 to 275. And then we put the RDA for carbs in general, based on a 2,000 calorie diet, what your carb intake is. Now, what our producer Robson, I'm gonna use him as an example. I know he's been on a low carb diet for a long time. He's back in the gym, and he's told me on several occasions he could use a little more energy in those in when he's doing the weights. So maybe those could be his higher carb days versus the lower carb. Is that kind of
That is
how
how
we're doing
some
it?
people, I think that's a great strategy. We do know that carbohydrates are what fuels muscles. The carbs, whatever type of carbs, complex carbs, simple carbs, they are stored in the body, in the muscle as glycogen. Some is also stored in the liver, to be technically accurate, but it's the source of fuel for muscle. And for that muscle to perform work, you need carbohydrates. That's generally speaking, of course.
Right.
And so do some people do find that um, when they are consuming really low carbs, that they just can't hit those max, the max reps,
Yeah.
the weight that they want in the gym on their weight training days, and they want to be able to kind of push themselves to the limit, and those extra carbs can help to fuel that workout or even help with recovery after the workout. Because we, again, it's all about, if you're looking at this from a physical activity, a weight training, maintaining or building lean tissue, you want the carbohydrates to restore the glycogen, or even
Yeah.
allow you to store more than you once were able to. We know that carbohydrates after a workout helps to increase those glycogen stores in the muscles, so it's helping with that. We also know that the carbohydrates will provide an insulin response, and in this case the insulin is a good thing that
Yeah.
you want, because that again is helping the muscles to grow and recover.
This kind of reminds me, it takes me back, Dr. Crystal, to my high school years when I played football, and it was Friday night, Friday night football in Texas. Let me tell you, that's big, big stuff, right? And I think it was the Thursday night before the game on Friday, we would go to like a pasta place and have all you can eat pasta. And we would load up on those carbs to provide that needed energy for the game and even post game recovery. And you would do we would do like all you can eat bread and spaghetti. That was like what we did.
Yes,
And
yes.
we're teenagers. You can imagine we're like, rah, rah, rah. We were just shoving that stuff down. But I think it's kind of the same concept, right? Those coaches, the fitness trainers, they knew, we need to load them up on that ready energy to perform at a higher level. And that's kind of what this is.
Yes, and just to clarify, like with that pasta we're talking, that complex energy, Dr. Mike, we did the same thing in Georgia. My dad was a football coach, Coach Moore, and I
Hey, Coach Moore.
remember the coaches, and my dad was in there with them, and the coaches would make the spaghetti meals before on
Big
game
pots,
day. They
right?
they
Big
would do
pots
it,
of it.
big pots of spaghetti, and I was getting in on some of that spaghetti too. But yes, it is kind of that same idea. Sometimes you see it game day before, a couple of days before, this idea of carb loading,
Yeah.
and so that it aligns with this concept of incorporating those carbs to help to support performance.
Right. And so going back to our friend Robson,
Mhm.
when we say you can have a higher carb day to help fuel your workout, we're not talking about eating donuts and eating pastry. I mean, you still want to make sure you're eating some good carbs, right? Even though, like in high school, yeah, it was the white pasta, whatever, that gave us that energy. But for as we get older, we need to make good choices about the carbs we're eating, right?
We are, and those could be high protein carbs as well. So you even see people consuming peanut butter. People think about
Oh
peanut
yeah, good
butter
point.
as
Yeah.
a source of protein. Peanut butter also contains carbs. Also, making sure those carbs are non-starchy carbs. And so we're talking about the vegetables, the
Yeah.
broccoli, the spinach, having those types of carbs, as well as the whole grains. My husband, I think I mentioned this, he makes homemade bread. Like
Yep. Yeah.
created his start. So he loves my days when I'm going to the gym. He was like, "Yeah, you have a piece of bread." I'm like, "Okay," but it's good bread, right? He
It's
makes
good
it
bread,
with
right? It's
whole
good
grain
carbs.
flour,
Yeah. Yeah.
3 ingredients: flour, water, salt, and I feel better when I have a little bit more of the carbs before I work out.
Yeah, because in that case, and again, this is a big point. When you have some of that bread and you go work out, you're burning those carbs. You're not storing them as fat, right? That's the carb problem is we're not burning them. We're eating all of this immediate energy, but we don't need it. And so the body doesn't waste energy. And so what does it do? It stores it as its best energy storage it can, which is fat.
That's such a good point, Dr. Mike. A lot of us, and I say us because I've gone on the low carb end of the spectrum as well. We demonize the carbohydrates, but I think you said it best. The carbohydrates without the energy expenditure, and especially the simple carbs, Dr.
Yeah,
Mike.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
think
Yeah,
there is really very little space for simple carbs unless you are an endurance athlete, you're running marathons. And yeah, that's the time where the simple carbs are really giving you that immediate energy. But outside of that spectrum, the simple carbs, and we're talking candies, high
pastries,
fructose corn
donuts,
syrup,
all of that. Yeah, 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 yeah.
the pastries and the donuts and the highly refined carbohydrates. That is where we're saying those should be limited, and your high carb days again are not you going and binging out. This is not what we would typically consider a cheat day, because you are still kind of keeping an eye on the protein, you're keeping an eye on the fat, and you're still staying within your caloric parameters.
Yeah, I like that.
Meaning,
Yeah,
if you're
yeah,
at a calorie deficit, 500 calorie deficit, you're still staying within that 500 calorie deficit. You are just now having a little more carbs, a little less fat.
yeah.
We want to
Uh,
always keep that protein.
yeah, absolutely. No, for sure. Hey, but those numbers we showed, I don't know, Robson, can you show those numbers again of the low, the high? There we go. There we go. Look how awesome Robson is. He must have had some bread or something. He has energy right now. Um, don't make me start to giggle, Dr. Crystal. Um, yeah, but I just wanted to confirm these are total carbs. These are not net carbs. And if you're on net carbs, meaning you take the total, you subtract out the fiber, you subtract out maybe some sugar alcohols, and that's your net carbs. Those net carbs are the ones that affect sugar and stuff more. So if you're on a low carb diet, one of your whole goals is to keep the net carbs a little lower. So just keep that in mind. These numbers we're showing you here, that's total carbs, right? You still need to keep in mind how much net I'm getting out of that.
Correct.
Yeah. So carb cycling, when I first saw this, Dr. Crystal, I thought immediately this was about weight loss, but it's not, right? Does carb cycling help us to lose weight? Because that's what I thought why we were doing this trend.
Yes. Well, Dr. Mike, I would have to say yes and no. I'm
Okay.
I'm going to say yes and no, and here's why. Because there are influencers, or if you go to YouTube, you will see videos that specifically focus on carb cycling and fat loss. The idea is that the carb cycling um, is helping somehow to support leptin, which is going to help you burn fat. And
Okay.
I'm just explaining to you what we're seeing, as we kind of search at the circulation of content on this topic. But what we are referring to on this show is really not about weight loss, um, because as we mentioned, or as I mentioned earlier, you are not changing your caloric intake. If you are
There you go.
at
Yeah.
whatever deficit, whatever amount of calories you are consuming, that's the same amount
That's
whether you're on a
staying the
low
same.
carb
Yeah.
or a high
Yeah.
carb day.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
really not about losing weight. It's really about boosting exercise performance, and that's where we mostly see the research is helping to support an individual who is working out.
Yeah. So far in our presentation of carb cycling, I'm on. I think it sounds pretty good. I understand what Robson was saying. It
Mhm.
seems like if you're already on kind of a low carb diet, having a little bit more in some of those hard exercise days, all of this is starting to make sense. So far, I'm on board with carb cycling. But we got to talk about, are there any established, well, maybe I shouldn't even say it that way. Are there any disadvantages to this? Like, is there a problem with carb cycling, whether you're low carb or you're just normal carb? Like, what do you see anything wrong here as a clinical nutritionist?
Well, that's kind of
That
putting me
was-
on the spot, Dr. Mike. I would say for someone who's not really able to adapt to variations day to day, then maybe adding in a few of those higher carb days may make it more difficult for you to maintain on your lower carb days. It may
yes,
kind of
good point.
give you a few more carb cravings. But I would say this is just me speaking from how I kind of understand the science, that if you're trying to do this without the physical activity piece,
Very good point.
because those carb cravings really come from the ups and downs of that glucose.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
when you bottom out, you start kind of wanting and craving more. And so I think but generally speaking, Dr. Mike, the carb cycling is thought to maybe help with some of those cravings, because whenever you are consuming the low carbs, sometimes the body may kind
oh,
of
yes.
plateau a little
I
bit.
know where you're going with this. Yes, yes, yes. This is good. Keep going. This is
So
good stuff.
potentially, this is we can theorize all day, but this is, I guess, generally speaking, that would be the only disadvantage, is the person who's kind of weak. I don't want to call you weak,
Well,
but sometimes I would
well,
say I'm weak when I have some extra little carbs around the house. If they're here,
you get them. You're
every
going to
day
get
is
them.
going to be a
But
high carb day.
two quick follow up points. So number one, I totally get what you're saying. It's the same thing that happens with dieters in general.
Yeah.
Cheat days can often become cheat weeks. And you have to be very careful. You got to be disciplined enough to say, okay, that next morning, I'm back on this. So I agree with that number one point you made. Number two, there is evidence, at least if you're talking about the ketosis stuff, right? That there is plateauing, and there are some ketosis doctors out there that do ask their patients to eat more carbs for a little bit.
Hmm.
And then you kick it back in and you get back into that ketosis phase. So
Yes,
I think you're right on both points.
I've seen it. Yes, we have seen some literature thinking, kind of leading us in that direction.
What about muscle and carb cycling? You and I are always big on maintaining lean muscle mass, right? I mean, that to
Hmm.
us, Dr. Crystal and I uh, have a podcast called Live Foreverish. It's about liveforeverish.com. It's about quick plug. It's about living, it's not just living longer. It's more about healthy health span. That's kind of like how we like to say it. Strength, vitality, energy, good muscle mass is important in all that. So anytime we talk about diets, trends of any kind, we always like to go back to the muscle. What's going on to the muscle here, Dr. Crystal, as far as we know with carb cycling?
Yeah, so the high carb phase is supporting the muscle growth due to kind of the intensity. If you are using this with intensity exercises, and so yes, that is kind of the idea behind it is being able to support muscle growth and muscle recovery.
Great. So to you, it's a plus on muscle, and that's important, right? That's all living forever ish. So where do you? Okay, so that takes us through carb cycling. What it is, why people do it, what are the perceived benefits, are there downsides? All right, carb cycling, Dr. Crystal. Um, I'm okay with it. What about you?
I am. I think that, just when you look at your prescription, if we had to give you that, just think about it in terms of the days that maybe you're doing more walking, maybe it's your recovery day. Scale it back on the carbs. Continue your low carb diet, but on days when you are doing more strength training, it's okay to add in a few more carbs than you typically would add into your meal.
Right, which is the point of carb cycling. So let me rephrase what I said. If you're following carb cycling for the reason people do carb cycling, it seems like it's pretty good. You'll
Yeah.
have more energy, Robson, for those weight days that you like to do, but then you go back to the normal low carb that's been working for you for so long.
Yes.
Boom. All right. Carb cycling. Now we got to move on to another one. When I first heard about protein pacing, I got to be honest with you. I really didn't know what this was about. I was going to be honest. Is this weight loss? Is this muscle? Is this back to exercise performance?
Uh-huh.
I really had no idea. So let's just start off. Basic definition. What is protein pacing?
It's the consumption of a high protein meal at 4 to 6 pace intervals daily, which is a little different than how we are typically trained to think about our meals. We have a
Okay.
breakfast, lunch, dinner. And then, our snacks in between can be, whatever you would like to munch on, not all the time focused on protein. And so what protein pacing is this idea of kind of spreading out that protein all throughout the day.
And does so it goes so why would people want to do this? And there's a theory to this. And let's be honest right off the bat. We did our research with this. We're going to review a study here coming up, but there's still a lot to learn about protein pacing. And the theory, if I understand this correctly, Dr. Crystal, is what really drives hunger is the need for amino acids, protein, right? So if you're constantly supplying a little bit of those amino acids more throughout the day in smaller chunks, you're not going to be as hungry, and maybe there's some weight loss that might happen. Is that kind of, am I on the right path here?
Yes, I mean that is definitely the theory behind the protein pacing, as well as the idea that protein it takes more calories than carbs or fats to digest the protein as well. So the body is always kind of working and burning energy. So yes, but that is the theory.
So
Ultimately,
so how
appetite control.
so how is this theory then supported? So there is one study. Do you want to walk us through this study?
Okay, so this study, it was a 12-week protein pacing with calorie restriction study. And there was a 30% protein diet, enhanced body composition by reducing total body fat, abdominal fat, and visceral fat, along with weight loss. in 40 men and women. And this kind of the paced out 30% protein diet was compared to a 15% protein diet
Jeez.
across 3 meals
Yeah.
a day. So, as we looked at this, Dr. Mike, immediately we said, we are not comparing apples to
Yeah.
apples here.
Two different groups.
And
Yeah.
and so we do have problems with kind of this main study that's being used to promote protein pacing, because the participants weren't receiving the same amount of
Right.
protein.
Right. I mean, basically, the test group got a lot more, got double the amount of protein, which makes it hard then to have a lot of confidence in the final result, which the result did see there was a best increase in resting metabolic rate. But there were some other things, right? There were reduction. I'm just reading this off the study. Total reduction of total body fat, abdominal fat, visceral fat. So there were results with that test group. But the problem is you're comparing it to the control group who got half the amount of protein. That could be a big difference.
That could be a difference. And then the other idea that I want to point out is you can't really apply this to the general population of individuals who may be trying to lose weight, because not only were the researchers exploring this idea of protein pacing, kind of spreading out the protein, but the participants uh, were undergoing caloric restriction. And you also are seeing this as it relates to intermittent fasting. So, I mean, these are very targeted plans, specific plans that
Yeah.
individuals are following. And so when we look at protein pacing, we have to only apply the results to those parameters.
Yeah, you make a great point. If you want to test protein pacing, and this is just a good lesson for all listeners, and when you look at clinical studies, if you want to test protein pacing, you can't add other diets like calorie restriction. You can't have differences in two groups. It's just not good methodology, and it just makes it hard again to have confidence in those studies. So, Dr. Crystal, we already carb cycling, if done correctly for the right reasons, sounds pretty good. Protein pacing, thumbs up or thumbs
I'm
down?
right here right now. I need more
I
research
have too. Yeah.
with
Yeah.
protein pacing. I think in
Yeah.
theory, it definitely sounds like it's something that it is probably what we do, Dr. Mike, especially if you think about your snacks. I'm all about a good high protein snack.
Sure.
That
I
is,
get it.
some
I get it.
cottage cheese. I'll add some berries in there. I'll even put a teaspoon of peanut butter in my cottage cheese. I mean, I try to because it's sometimes challenging to meet your protein requirements.
Yeah.
So if you
All for the
focus in on
protein.
protein,
I
yeah.
if you want to spread out your post protein, have more protein at snack time, that's all fine. That's all good. But the proponents of protein pacing are applying a lot of other benefits to the process of pacing.
Mm-hmm.
That is where that's where we're like this. That's where we need more research.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow, fantastic show today, Dr. Crystal. Thanks for joining me. So, carb cycling, protein pacing. Listen, again, we're not saying do it, don't do it. That's not why we're here. We're just presenting to you the facts of it. We gave a thumbs up if done right for carb cycling. We just need more information on protein pacing. Don't forget, though, there's another. This, I think, is an article, right, Dr. Crystal? Lifeextension.com/diet trends.
Yes. So we do have a diet trends article, and it's focusing on protein pacing.
Okay, so more specifics about that. And if
Yeah.
you got the QRC code right there, just take a picture. Boom, you go right to the blog or go to lifeextension.com/diet trends. Don't forget, when you're at Life Extension, our sponsor, Life Extension, they want to say thank you Shop around. When you're ready to check out, put the discount code LE. Wait, let me say that again. LE Live. LE Live. Let's do it one more time. LE Live. And you'll get 10% off, $50 or more, plus free shipping and handling. That's at lifeextension.com. Use the code LE Live. And don't forget, we go live every Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time. So wherever you watch us, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever it is, like us, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, so you never miss a show. 12 noon Eastern time every Wednesday. I'm Dr. Mike, and that is
Dr. Crystal.
Dr. Crystal. We'll see you next time.